One, however, had obviously gone haywire. It was pounding on its robot brethren. Oz stood nearby, aiming his silver remote at a malfunctioning elf. A throng of people pressed against the window, watching the wizard work on the remarkable creations and giggling at his troubles. Sabrina glanced down the street and noticed that there were similar crowds ogling the other windows, which featured scenes from the night before Christmas, A Christmas Carol, and the Nutcracker. Each window display was more magical than the last. Sabrina remembered that L. Frank Baum, the man who had written about the Land of Oz, had described the wizard as a mechanical genius, able to create realistic, even frightening illusions. He was so talented, he had once convinced the entire country of Oz that he was a powerful sorcerer. Granny maneuvered through the crowd and tapped on the window. Oz turned with an irritated expression, which disappeared when he spotted her. He waited for her to come inside and then climbed out of the back of the window display. The group squirmed their way into the bustling store where Oz met them. He shook their hands and then ushered them into a room marked staff only. What Sabrina saw inside was even more amazing than the window displays. The room was filled with half-finished figures, many blinking and buzzing, waiting for their moment in the spotlight. Robotic birds sat on perches singing sweet little songs, and a family of half-painted polar bears played with a newborn cub in the corner. They looked so real it was hard not to get nervous around them. There were also stacks of papers and old engineering books lying about, a full-length mirror leaning against the wall, and a cot sitting in the far corner. Sabrina suspected the wizard slept in his workroom more often than not. "I'm sorry, I'm so frazzled," Oz said as he offered everyone a seat. "Today is what happened to the rest of the year day here at the store. You'd think people might realize there are 364 days to shop before Christmas." "We were admiring your windows," Granny said. "The displays are extraordinary." Oz picked up a robot head. It blinked at him and smiled. "Yes, well, it's the closest thing I'll get to real magic. I used to be a first-rate sleight-of-hand man back in the day. When I first found myself in Oz, I did a trick for the mayor of Munchkinland, and before I knew it, I was the great and terrible Oz. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of demand in New York City for a guy with that title. I tried my hand entertaining at kids' birthday parties, but video games put an end to that. Of course, when I heard about this job, I jumped at it. I always had a knack for mechanical things. Now I create illusions with circuits instead of my hands." "They look almost real," Daphne said. "Thank you," Oz replied. "They're like my children. In fact, if I can't get the elf in the window to behave, I'm going to have to put him in timeout. Now, I know you all didn't come down here just to admire the decorations. How goes the search?" "We've got a suspect," Daphne said. Oz raised an eyebrow. "Cobweb," Granny said. "That can't be," Oz said. "Oberon told us," Daphne added. The wizard raised both eyebrows. "It's a long story," Granny said. "We believe Cobweb's been working with a group called the Scarlet Hand. That mark they found on Oberon," Oz said. Granny nodded. "Can you pass this information on to Mustard Seed? He may be in danger from Cobweb as well." "Of course," Oz said. "Unfortunately, that brings us to another dead end. We don't know where to find Cobweb. He's not still at the Golden Egg, is he?" "No, all but Titania, Mustard Seed, and his men have scattered. Do you have any friends?" Granny Rhoda asked. The wizard shook his head. He was pretty busy following Oberon and Titania's orders. He was very loyal to them. That's what makes this all such a big surprise. Still, there might be someone who can help. There's a fairy godmother over in West Midtown who I've seen with Cobweb. If he needs a place to hide, he might head there. Her name is Twilla Rose. She owns a dress shop." "That's a big help," Daphne said. "By the way," Oz said, "between me and you, your friend, the chubby guy, Mr. Hampstead?" Sabrina asked. "Yes, he's made himself a powerful enemy today. Word is he stole Tony Fat's girlfriend. If I were him, I'd get out of town as fast as possible. The fairy godfathers aren't people you mess around with." Twila Rose's Fashion Emporium was on the corner of 11th Avenue and 57th Street next to a parking lot for garbage trucks. The smell of the block was even worse than the one coming from Puck's Cocoon. Granny had left word of hotel for Mr. Hamster and Bess to meet them at the fairy godmother's store. They arrived soon after the grooms and Muff. Though they were so caught up in conversation, they barely noticed the family waiting for them in the fading daylight. Granny pulled the couple aside and gave them Oz's warning. Bess looked concerned, but Mr. Hamster just smiled and reminded Granny Rhoda that he was more than capable of taking care of himself and Bess if need be. While the grown-ups talked, Sabrina looked at the store's window display and decided that this Twila Rose person wasn't exactly sure what the word fashion meant. The dresses were so ruffled and brightly colored that the mannequins wearing them looked embarrassed. So what's the difference between a fairy and a fairy godmother? Daphne asked Muff. The little fairy sneered. Of course, you ignoramus like you wouldn't know the difference. Fairy godmothers and godfathers are lower beings. Unlike true-blooded fairies, they need wands to perform magic, and they are born as adults, sometimes as very old people. They can be painfully ugly with their gray hair and wrinkles. It must take great strength on your part to tolerate them, said Granny Rhoda, who had caught the end of Muff's speech. It does, Muff said, nodding earnestly. Well, we don't know this Twila Rose, and if she's hiding cobwebs, she might be dangerous, Hampstead said, pulling his pants up over his belly. Be careful and keep your eyes peeled. A fat orange tomcat lay outside, blocking the entrance to the store. Granny shooed it away and it raced shrieking into an old refrigerator box someone had dragged out onto the sidewalk. Inside the shop, they found racks and racks of shiny, poofy-sleeved ballroom dresses covered in frills and lace. There were also several shelves of shoes in shocking, unnatural colors and funky-shaped handbags. A roly-poly lady stepped out of the back room and approached the group. She had a big blue beehive hairdo atop an almost perfect circle overhead. Her eyebrows were drawn on and her cheeks and lips were bright pink. She was wearing a baby blue satin dress that made her look as if she might be off to her senior's prom at any moment. A rhinestone belt with blue and green blinking lights completed the look. Welcome to Twila Rose's Fashion Emporium. How can I help you? The woman sang. We're having a sale on spring fling for formal wear and shoes. It's never too early to get a head start on the coming seasons. Remember, everything in the store is a Twila Rose original. I designed everything myself. So you're Twila Rose? Granny asked. The one and only, the old woman said. Perhaps you've seen my work on the runways of Milan, Paris, and Canton, Ohio. The Wizard of Oz sent us, Daphne said. We're looking for cobweb, Granny Rhoda added. Twila Rose's eyes grew wide. Indeed. Oh my, I didn't recognize you, the Grimm family, she said louder than necessary. I'm so glad none of you people in the Grimm family were hurt in that Mopsy and the golden egg. Terrible, terrible situation. I'm so thrilled to meet the Grimm family. Well, I guess we know he's here somewhere, Sabrina said. The woman was obviously trying to warn Cobweb of their arrival. I'm not sure what you're talking about, you people in the Grimm family. I just make clothing. In fact, I feel inspired. I'm going to give you all the Twila Rose VIP makeover. Won't that be fun? Twila Rose reached into the folds of her dress and produced a magic wand. She waved it in the air and there was a loud bang. When Sabrina looked down, she was wearing a puffy leopard print dress with matching shoes. She looked over at the others and saw their clothes had been replaced as well. Daphne had on a rainbow-colored can-can dress, and Granny Rhoda was wearing a big pink gown with her hair as large as her whole body. Muff and Bess were both dressed in tracksuits covered in little golden bells and had snowshoes on their feet. Each of the women had so much makeup on, it looked as if it had been applied with a paintball gun. Poor Mr. Hamster was wearing an electric blue tuxedo with tails and a top hat. Even Puck's cocoon had been made over in different colored ribbons. Twila-Rose clapped her hands. "I am brilliant," she shouted. "You are all going to be the toast of New York City." "Underling, we don't have time for this nonsense," Moth said. "Oh no, you don't like the outfit? Maybe something more work appropriate? I'll fix you lickety-split." The fairy godmother waved her wand again, and bam! The dresses were gone, replaced with outfits that were even more outrageous. Now, each of the women wearing a long evening gown that had a badge, handcuffs, and a billy club swinging from it. Mr. Hamster was dressed in a black and white prison uniform and had a ball and chain around his left leg. He looked down and grunted. "Genius," Twila-Rose said, and shook her head. "But the makeup is all wrong." Bam! Sabrina turned to the mirror. She looked like a geisha from outer space with white pink makeup and silver lipstick. Bam! Now she was wearing fake vampire teeth and a beanie cap with a propeller on top. Bam! Sabrina looked down to find she was carrying a toy poodle with a diamond collar, and she herself had 2 purple shiners, and some of her teeth had been blackened out. "No, maybe it's the shoes," Twila-Rose said. Moth stepped forward and waved an angry finger at Twila-Rose. "I am a fairy and a member of the royal court, making me your superior. So if you are quite finished with your atrocious fashion show—" "Atrocious?" Twila-Rose said. She flicked her wrists, and before anyone could stop her, they were all bound from head to toe in thick steel chains. "It has been a long time since the glory days of Cinderella, but I'd hardly call my work atrocious." "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Daphne cried. "You are Cinderella's fairy godmother?" She tried to free her hand so she could insert it in her mouth. "Yeah, she's what made me a fashion design icon. After that dress, every princess from here to Timbuktu would have killed for one of my designs. But those were the good old days," she said sadly. "Enough!" Moth roared as she wiggled out of the chains that bound her. "Your blabbering is wasting our time. If you don't tell us where Cobweb is, I'll—" "There's no need for threats, princess," a voice said from behind the curtains at the back of the store. The drapes were pulled aside and Cobweb stepped through. "Murderer!" Moth screamed. "You are confused," Cobweb said. "I have killed no one." "We know you did it," Sabrina said. "We heard it straight from Oberon." "I am innocent," Cobweb said, slightly confused. Just then, there was a tremendous crash, and the front door to the shop blew off its hinges. The group struggled to see what had caused the commotion. Standing in the doorway were Tony Fats and Bobby Screwball. Their magic wands were held tight in their huge hands. "How did you find us?" Bess cried. The 2 goons ignored her. Their eyes were trained on Mr. Hamster. "You shouldn't have messed with my girl," Tony Fats said as he and his partner stepped into the store. "'Cause now you and me, we're going to have to settle this the way we did in Fairy." Tony Fats raised his wand and, with a flick of his wrist, a bolt of white-hot energy rocketed toward the group. Chapter 6. Hamster leaped out of the way, and the blast missed him by inches. Unfortunately, it crashed into a rack of polyester dresses that exploded into flames. "My spring collection!" Twila-Rose shouted as she desperately tried to put out the fire that was melting her gowns. She stomped furiously on a pink hoop-skirted prom dress, completely ignoring the peril of everyone around her. In the chaos, Sabrina watched Cobweb fly out of the shop. "Forget dresses!" she cried, as flames rapidly spread throughout the store. "Get us out of these chains!" Twila-Rose turned and flicked her wand. The chains vanished, freeing the group. Unfortunately, smoke was filling the room, with Tony Fats and Bobby Screwball, who was filling the room. That seems to be the end of this video. I'll send more later. Goodbye.